Hello and welcome to another edition of Food Chain. On today's episode, we're looking at the role of the World Food Programme in Ghana's agricultural space and the investments they've made, the years so far, how they have impacted the sector. My name is Emma Davis and I'll be speaking with the Country Director, Barbara Clemens. So let's start with the role of WFP.
Well, WFP Ghana and WFP in general, our mandate is food security, food and nutrition security, and we own the SDG 2, which is zero hunger. In so doing, we recognize that we alone cannot get anyone to zero hunger. We require the support and the efforts of our partners, our development partners, our humanitarian partners, the private sector, and anyone out there that's interested in food security. So we also take ownership of the SDG goal number 17, which is partnering to support the Sustainable Development Goals. And basically our role for WFP Ghana, as you know, Ghana has enjoyed a sustained period of peace and stability. So in many other country offices, we do humanitarian assistance. However, in Ghana, our role is predominantly development. And what does that mean in the development space as well as the agricultural space? Is to support all things related to the food systems, see a gap, and how can we position ourselves strategically to assist in filling that gap. We look at ourselves as a strategic partner of the government. For the work that we're doing here in Ghana, we want to do less of direct implementation and more of facilitation. So what is key for us is building relationships with our key line ministries, one being the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and their plan for Planting for Food and Jobs 2.0. How can WFP assist? How can we leverage the important body of work that we've done globally, and how can we put that at the disposal of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. And we believe we have a key role to play in that, in moving the needle on Ghana's productivity, in moving the needle of Ghana beyond aid, where we are actually working with small food processors and medium food processors to increase productivity for the purpose of export. Normally we would be sitting here and this would be a theoretical conversation, but we definitely have had successes with that. Several years ago, WFP Ghana made some catalytic investments in 2 food processors, Premium Food and Yet an Agro group of companies. Currently, as we speak, Premium is a vendor of WFP where they are shipping specialized nutritious cereals to other countries where WFP has operations, humanitarian operations. Thus far, we have shipped a total of 10,000 metric tons of specialized nutritious food, valued at over 13 million, with 15,000 metric tons in the pipeline for future procurement. For Yedent, although they're not a vendor of WFP, what they have gone on to do was to open their domestic line where they are providing or producing products for different users. We look at that as a success because it will form the basis for our next generation country strategic plan in how we will make additional investments in multi-user facilities.
Okay. let me start with the partnerships, because you've said a lot of things I want to ask, but in the opening speech you said everything. Partnerships, aside government, which organizations have you partnered with? And give me an estimate of how much investment has gone into Ghana's, agri sector, or to ensure SDG 2 is achieved.
Okay, well, I started off in terms of partnerships. Our headquarters is in Rome, and we have 2 other UN organizations in Rome, FAO as well as EFAD. Our first line of defense when we are partnering with other organizations, because we each have our own specialty, is to first look at the Rome-based agencies. And then further, if I would just use premium food as an example, then the next level are other UN organizations like UNIDO, which help us to work with premium food in developing standards, manufacturing standards, and also working with the government, FDA, to look at the FDA standards, what premium food is producing, to what extent they're complying. We also looked at the private sector and to see how we can capitalize on other medium scale or large scale processors, not just in Ghana, but externally, bringing them to the table and leveraging their expertise to help us get the production of premium off the ground. And when we talk about investment, I was careful to use the terminology catalytic investment. Many times, and this is not just in Ghana, but in many settings like Ghana, you have companies like Premium and Yedent. They find it extremely difficult to get financing from commercial banks. Often with investments like what WFP made, it's but a small fraction in the investment that was able to be leveraged by Premium and Yedent after the fact, because with the promise of WFP's investment, and also that WFP is looking towards these medium scale processors for uptake, it reduces the risk, the financing risk. So the private sector, like commercial banks, would find it more advantageous to allow Premium to leverage or to acquire debt to build their facility. So we bring to the table that type of leveraging, opening the doors, as it were, to allow additional inputs in terms of credit to flow into these medium scale processors. So those types of investments are key.
You talked about planting for food and jobs. I want to know how WFP played a role, and what you foresee the next phase to be.
Well, in terms of us playing the role in formulating the policy, not much. I think our role is understanding what that policy is, looking at how our expertise could help, enhance the policy and also operationalize the policy. Basically, planting for food and jobs sees that to increase domestic productivity, to also increase the surplus of domestic productivity, and to what extent WFP could play a role in off-taking once productivity is increased. Positioning ourselves in terms of being part of the planning to see that if globally we procure many metric tons of food and grain. So positioning ourselves to see how does Ghana provide a value addition for our global supply chain people to start looking at the provisions that planting for food and jobs had so that we can procure more food from Ghana. Part of that is working with the government and all of the the partners that's here to get productivity up. We have an ethical standard that we don't procure from domestic stock for domestic consumption. So if you have surpluses, then for us that opens the door for us to be able to procure additional. Yeah.
Someone would say Ghana is barely food secure, and we are exporting or taking the food away.
No, but that's why I mentioned that.
Well,
first and foremost, getting your productivity up to meet your domestic demand, and to the extent that there is surplus, then we are looking at whether or not. So the main goal is to get your productivity up to a level that you could do offtake. But Ghana has a unique, I think I wouldn't call it a barrier, but a unique situation in that part and parcel of that is really to increase the demand for domestic productivity, the yield that is being produced. For example, rice. To the extent that rice production goes up, you would expect that demand for domestic rice would go up. We have a huge demand for imported rice. So those have to work in tandem, look at that. And that's part of some of the things that we are looking at. And with regards to the Africa Continental Free Trade, to make favorable trade relations within Africa to increase our stature. And to have Ghana play a major role in that, I think is key.
Talk of the rice. Recently there were conversations about import quota on rice and chicken. Do you think that is the way forward?
Well, I think that if I were a farmer in Ghana and I was growing rice, or I had a poultry farm, I'd like to know that if I made those investments in my farm, that there would be, first and foremost, the demand for domestic uptake. And I think that there's a responsibility to that person making that type of investment in their land, in their country, for their market, for them to sell that in. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. WFP recently started a system where they directly support farmers. How's that going?
I think it's going well, and let me just clarify that. I hope it's what you're talking about. The smallholder farmers in the north.
Yes.
I think the funding that came in for those farmers were in other programs before the assistance package. And they were given inputs in terms of fertilizers as a result of the shortage of fertilizers.
Due to the war.
Yes, exactly. So they were given these inputs, and the assumption was not that they were given, but they also had to spend their money to acquire those inputs. And the assumption was, because the prices of those fertilizers had gone up, they would have had to take away from other equally as needed items from their household. As I mentioned, we are a food security organization, and we wanted to make sure that these farmers did not compromise their food security as a result of making sure that they had adequate fertilizers for their crops at a sacrifice of making negative coping choices for their next meal. So these cash transfers were made to, first of all, replace what they would have used for fertilizers to ensure that they had a nutritious diet, and secondly, if there were surpluses, to be able to then use also for farm inputs. And it's going well. We are now going into the second tranche of those transfers in August, so I'm happy with the outcome.
Great, great. We seem to be talking a lot about food security in Ghana, but one thing WFP focuses on is nutrition security. Can you tell us how it has been so far, your initiatives in ensuring that aside the farmer-based support, what other initiatives have you engaged in and how successive have they been?
Okay. I think I started off at the onset of our interview that saying that we are trying to move away from direct implementation, although we do have some legacy funding and legacy activities that's ongoing. I think the main one that comes to mind is the work that we're doing in Karaga, where we are working with vulnerable women and children, providing nutrition support. We picked that area because of the latest census and the statisticians finding that those were the areas that was most food and nutrition insecure. So we're providing cash assistance and also livelihood assistance with a view that, again, from a perspective that when people's food security are compromised, they continue to make negative coping choices. I may not buy leafy vegetables, I may not buy dairy, I may not buy the food that my children eat, I may just buy gari. It fills your stomach, but at least you're not going to bed crying. So we're doing that. With regards to what we are doing along in the nutrition space is that WFP historically in Ghana had done a lot of work with the Ministry of Health regarding something called social behavior change communications, which are their messagings to say eat healthy, in how you prepare your food and making sure that you have proper nutrition. And we did that a lot at the community level. But we also recognize that most of us have two reasons why we don't eat healthy. For me, I love fried fish. I know I should steam it, I should bake it, but I don't always do that. So for me, it's a habit, is what I like, it's a preference. And then there are those who don't have the resources to buy nutritious food. So as I mentioned earlier, I will buy gari. If I'm a working mother of 4 and I only have 50 Ghana cedis a month, I can't eat nutritious food. So this is what I do. So one of the initiatives that WFP is looking at for implementation in the future under our next generation country strategic plan that will be starting in 2024 is to pair those messaging with a loyalty where people will earn loyalty points when they make the decisions that we would like them to make. When I say we, I mean the government. They want you to have a well-balanced and a nutritious diet.
But how would you track that?
We are looking at a platform, a digital platform that will be able to do it. And another thing, we support innovation, but we also support it from a perspective that we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We go to the stores, and many stores ask, what is your phone number? And with that, you earn points and you get discounts. So something similar to that. And we have, within this year, have identified many private sector partners that are willing to work with us, and we're working with several digital companies that are willing to support that. The assumption is that you would probably deprioritize certain things just so over nutrition. So therefore, we want to look at what you would be deprioritizing and give you points towards that. So you don't have to use your limited income towards rent. Conceivably, if you earn points, you could apply it to your rent, you could apply it to your school fees, you could apply it to doctor's appointments. And these are things that have gone on in other settings that we believe that this could be an ideal setting for.
So these points, in what form does it come?
Well, it would come in 2 points, two forms. One is actually being able to redeem your points towards your rent, or you could cash out your points. The cash out points would be less because we want to be able to track that what you're redeeming it for is for a worthy purpose. Yeah, we don't want you to go take it and buy alcohol or buy cigarettes.
Yeah.
So that would be the incentive there is you would earn, if you had, let's say, 30 points or 1,000 points and you just wanted to get cash, the cash equivalent would be much less than the equivalent for buying your groceries, as it were. So we want to have the platform in such a way that it enables us to track, because it supports other initiatives that the government may have, and therefore we can give substantive digital solutions with regards to are people really meeting their nutritious targets and those types of things.
But people who usually face this malnutrition are in the rural areas, and most of them don't use and do not have access to digital platforms.
Well, they don't have access to digital platforms, but they do have access to phones.
Okay.
And they do have connectivity. And when you mentioned that, I smiled because years ago, I remember when they were introducing the cell phones, and some of these conversations that we had was, how would the market women use cell phones when they were introducing Momo or these transfers? I think we shouldn't sell ourselves short. I think that the biggest thing is that it will work if you build a good platform and if it serves the purpose and if it truly meets the needs of the people that are using it. If we try it and it doesn't, then we need to go back to the drawing board to see. I think one of the key things about what we are envisioning, although I mentioned nutrition because it was an easier thing to do, to mention, I think WFP, for its next generation country strategic plan, is envisioning 5 pillars. One will be emergency preparedness and response. One is nutrition, as I mentioned, food systems. The other is social protection, and the other is service on demand. And while we talked about the platform related to nutrition, we envision it as integrative across platforms. For example, in our emergency preparedness, in the urban settings, we have huge problems with people clogging up their gutters and things like that. Literally, we envision that communities will earn points for doing the right thing and monitoring it to an extent that they could earn community assets. In terms of food systems, farmers who are adopting climate smart agricultural practices could conceivably earn points that they can use for farming inputs. These are the types of programs that we're designing.
Let's talk about the current strategic plan. How's it going? This year is the last year for implementation, and you were looking at 4 outcomes. Have you been able to achieve all of them?
We have not been able to achieve all of them, but I think I giggle because one of the things that we've done under this current country strategic plan is the investment that we made in premium and Yedid, and how that has morphed and evolved to inform what we're doing. It has had a catalytic effect in terms of how we have designed all of our pillars, and it has really focused us that we should do less implementation. And I'll tell you why. Because at the beginning of that, our current country strategic plan, everything was all eyes were on the beneficiaries. A huge component of our beneficiary scope was smallholder farmers. And I remember at the onset of this plan, we were just coming off of this purchase for progress. That's what we used to call it, where our focus was on trying to enhance the productivity for smallholder farmers. and with a view that we would be purchasing from them or facilitating purchases from them. But an organization such as WFP, on the scale of which we are, it's no way we can deal directly with all of those smallholder farmers. We found that it was inefficient. But with working with organizations like Premium and Yedid, Premium alone sources maize and soya from about 100,000 smallholder farmers. They achieved the scale that we would have been unable to in our position. So they're providing, they're purchasing the raw materials directly from them. And because that uptake in the investment at WFP, that's who we have affected. So it's almost as if we are allowing the market, the invisible hand of the market, to take place. And that's the biggest lessons learned. And it was unintended at the beginning, but yet still, because of all the work that we've done, that's where we have come through.
You keep mentioning Premium. I think I should meet them.
You should. We're going to arrange for you to go and meet them. We'll send you the video, because I mentioned it, in organizations such as WFP and the UN, we're a not-for-profit entity. And many times we are accused of not knowing how it works in the private sector. But I think it has taught not just us, WFP, but other organizations such as yourself, that the best value proposition is strengthening the private sector so that it can do the work that you were hoping to do, and it won't be artificial. It'll be based on what the market is going to be bearing. And I think for me, that's the biggest lesson learned and the most success for our current country strategic plan.
Using Premium as a baseline, your involvement with the youth in the agri sector. I believe Premium is owned by someone youthful and innovative.
He's not youthful. You kill me. He'll kill me. Sorry, Premium. He'll kill me if he hears me say that. He's not useful, but he's a Ghanaian who has a lot of passion for the work that he does, and he is committed to the success, I think, of his country. Having said that, he employs many youth. He employs interns from your various universities, and he has been instrumental in launching the careers of many of them, which is one thing that I admire about the work that he's done. Is something that when I initially joined WFP Ghana about a year and almost 2 years in now, saying, how do you employ youth? But every time I go there, I see young people. So I think he recognizes his role as a business leader in Ghana. Both he and Yedid employs a lot of youth. And spinning off from that relationship, I think one of our main focus really are youth and women. So when we do our targeting, or when we are designing our activities, we oftentimes look to what are the gender norms that exclude or assign these particular roles to youth or women, and how can we layer in our design and our planning where they're included more. So that's always a consideration for us.
Any recommendations to government, to the public?
I think I will close with that. I think we are the stewards of a great continent that has a tremendous amount of potential, and we need to take that stewardship very seriously. And I do think that zero hunger and food and nutrition security is doable for the continent and doable for Africa. But I think we all, for Ghana, but I think we all must play a role.
So, eat Ghana, grow Ghana, purchase Ghana. And on that note, I end Food Chain. My name is...